So, Aaron, hello. I'm Eric Sabo, and I'm very grateful and happy to talk to you. And it's great honor to me. And I'm a father. My son is sledging now outside, and I'm a trainer. I'm a teacher. And this interview will make for my website, which
Okay.
which deals with courage and the word of rhetoric, public speaking, of course. Okay, so Aaron, my first question is, in this period, there are so many difficulties in the world. How
Yep.
do you live at this coronavirus COVID time? How was your life changed? How are you?
Well, for me, it has mainly changed with the type of interaction that I have, just as everyone else. We're not able to talk to one another in person as much as we used to. Now we're relying more on virtual communication more than ever. And that changes how we approach interaction, where before we would always be able to go up to a person and say what we needed to say. Now we actually have to organize a call and then meet with them in order to get what we have to say off of our chest. As from a speaker standpoint, it now has completely changed the way that we interact with an audience. Before, where we could just speak in front of the audience and then we could have what they call a call and response, where we say an action for the audience, they'll give us back their response. They Speakers aren't able to do that as much now because whenever we're doing a virtual presentation, most of the audience is going to be on mute. It's going to be considered rude to take yourself off of mute. So now the verbal confirmation that speakers used to rely on, they can't rely on that anymore. Now you have to change how you interact with the audience, and that could be from getting them to actually do physical movement while they're shown on their screen, or actually typing something in on the chat. Those are the ways that I usually interact with my audience now. So to make a long story short, the way that we communicate nowadays with COVID has changed drastically, and I don't think it's going to be going anywhere.
Okay, thank you. Let's jump back to the past. Did you remember when you decide, I want to be a better public speaker? Why did you step on this way?
I started my public speaking journey, well, my deliberate public speaking journey, where I wasn't forced to do something that I didn't want to do by a parent. I started that in 2009. It was during the height of the Great Recession. There were many jobs that I thought that I was going to be able to have coming out of college that were now gone. I needed to find a way to stand out. Public speaking was something that I had heard time and time again that could give you a leg up on the competition when you were looking for a job. I wanted to find a way to stand out amongst the competition so that I could basically earn a living. So I joined Toastmasters International in 2009. I haven't looked back since. I joined in May of that year, and this year will be my 11th or 12th year. Sorry, I'm good at math. I mean, I'm not good at math. I'm good.
Okay, okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, when you decided to improve your public speaking skills, did you have a role model? Role model? If yes, who was she or he, and why?
Yeah, I had two role models when it came to public speaking. The person who introduced me to Toastmasters, his name is Dilip Abesekera. Dilip Abesekera was the president of Toastmasters International in 2005 and 2006. He also just happened to be an adjunct professor at my college. I went to a very small school called Central Pennsylvania College, which ironically enough really isn't in central Pennsylvania, but let's not go there. But at that small school, I just so happened to run into Dilip Abesekera, and I saw his ability to speak. I saw that ability. I said to myself, I want that ability too. He was the person who first sparked my interest in public speaking. The epitome of public speaking that I realized you could achieve came from watching President Barack Obama, who at the time was candidate Barack Obama. He was on the campaign trail. He was speaking a lot, and I saw his ability to mesmerize people with his speech. I saw his ability to influence people by his words. That's what made me say, okay, I see the value of public speaking. I see how high it can take you. I want that ability. That's what made me join Toastmasters.
Great. Okay. And I have so many times watched your speeches, and I like your structure of your speeches. And I am very interested in what kind of methods do you use when you write your speeches?
Well, the first method that I truly credit the most is my story file. And if you're not familiar, a story file is just a place where you put down the ideas for stories or flesh out your stories. I store mine on my computer through a digital service. There are people who will just use a physical book and pen. The idea is that you're always going to contribute to your story file. If you have a funny instance that happened, you take a moment, you write it down so that you can come back to it and flesh out the story later on. Or if you're feeling very creative and inspired, you can flesh out a rough draft of a story right there and then. Once you have that draft of your story, you can then use it anytime you wish. There are so many times where I will go through my story file when I want to write a speech. Let's say, I'll give you the example from this year. I wanted to give a speech about unity and about culture. I had a story that was already in my story file that I had actually already tested because I used that story as a social media post the prior year. I took that story and then I started to refine it. The strategy there is that I don't have to start with a blank page per se, because I can always just copy and paste something over and work with something. I'm a much better editor than I am a person who can just write out the story for the first time.
Okay, and you have a speech, and for example, before 6 months before your speech, how do you practice and where?
Yeah. My idea of practice may differ from a lot of different people's. I view any process of internalization as a form of practice. Therefore, when I'm writing out my speech for the first time, even though I'm writing out the speech, I'm also internalizing what I write. Then, obviously, when you recite the speech, that is a form of practice, and that's usually the practice that we're more familiar with the recitation of our speech. That's another form of practice because that's another form of internalization. One thing that I always will do, though, and I started doing this religiously in 2016, and it stayed with me throughout, I will audio record myself reading my script. Then I will listen to that recording. The process of, again, reciting your speech into the audio, that's a form of practice, but listening to the speech is also a great form of internalization. Therefore, I consider that the best form of practice because you can constantly listen to your speech over and over and over and over again. You can get your speech stuck in your head just like you get that annoying jingle in your head. So that is the best way that I believe you can practice. But in addition to that, when you listen to yourself, once you get over the pain of actually listening to your own voice, you can start listening for the mistakes that you may make. Then once you find those mistakes, you then correct your draft. When you correct your draft, you can start to audio record again, and then you listen to it. So that's a process of internalization. So by the time I'm ready to give the speech, I don't have to work that hard to remember it because I've worked on it for so long, I've internalized it so much.
Okay, and thank you. And I have watched your World Championship speech, of course, from 2019 about the fantastic wedding, and and of course the other speech from 2016 when you were the second place winner, and congratulations, of course. And you gave, of course, two different speeches to the audience. And how do you find the perfect topic of your speeches in 2016 and 2019? What was your method?
Well, my method really wasn't to find the perfect speech per se, because there really is no such thing as a perfect speech. There is no speech out there that is going to resonate with every single audience all around the world. One thing that you have to do if you are competing in a speech contest, in my case, it was the Toastmasters International Speech Contest, you have to commit to a speech. Just commit to one that you think has a solid story and a solid structure. It may not be perfect at that time or near perfection, but you're going to use the time that you have to perfect it. You're going to use that time to refine it and hone it and make it better. So when you are committed to your speech, and I would suggest that you do that fairly early in the speech contest season. The speech contest season starts around January for the majority of Toastmaster clubs. So I had an idea of what I wanted to do in the finals in January. It was just an idea, but I had already committed to it. So as the time got closer to the World Championship, I knew that, okay, I have this speech idea. I need to start refining it and honing it and thinking about how I can deliver it. So by the time it was time for the convention, I had something that had been refined. I had something that had been honed. I had something that had been practiced. So I would say the biggest thing is to commit to a solid speech early, then use the time and the process to make it better.
Amazing. And there are a lot of great World Championship speeches. For example, Kwong Yu Yang, Ramona J. Smith, Luisa Montalvo, and so on. And
yeah.
What is your favorite World Championship speech and why? Sorry.
My World Championship speech. I'm going to give you two answers for that one. So I'll give you the one that is my absolute favorite, and then I'm going to give you the one that is the most inspirational for me. The one that is my absolute favorite, hands down, is the 2014 world champion speaker, Denijaya Hidetarachi, with I See Something. I absolutely loved his speech. I loved his delivery, and I just loved his presence on stage. The speech that was the most inspirational for me, or that probably had the most impact on me as a speaker, would be Kwong Yu Yang's 2011 World Championship speech, the one that he placed second with in 2011, Fortune Cookie, because that was the speech that inspired me to compete in the international speech contest. If I hadn't heard that speech, had I not been inspired by Kwong, I would not have decided to compete.
It sounds great. And before my second TED Talk, I practiced power poses in the loo. and I did breathing exercises. And after that, then I went to the next to the audience and started to observe them. I didn't focus on myself, I focused on them. And because I wanted to give a speech present to them. And what are your tips before the speech? What do you do before your speech?
Before my speech, I generally try to get my mind off of the situation. And what I mean by that, I don't want to think about the size of the audience. I don't want to think about the pressure of the moment. I want to get my mind off of that and start getting it onto things that are going to calm me down. I will usually listen to music. I have my speech recordings that I will try to listen to, mainly the beginning of the speech. And I will just try to find a place where I can move freely. I don't like being seated in one spot, because usually when you're nervous and when you're highly anxious, your body wants to move. I want to be in a place where I can allow my body to move so that I can expel some of that excess energy that my body is creating in the form of adrenaline. So I'll go backstage, I'll move around, I'll listen to music, maybe dance in my chair a little bit, but I'll just try to get my mind off of the moment at hand so that I can be ready for the moment, if that makes sense.
Okay. And what kind of music do you
I'm very eclectic. I listen to all types of music. I have music in languages I don't even understand. I have a bunch of Japanese music. I have gospel music that I listen to fairly regularly. I listen to a lot of hip hop. I listen to all types of music. Okay. But really, the music that I listen to has to have some type of significance for me, especially before getting on stage. So it has to inspire me, or it has to be music that calms me down. Before the World Championship, I was listening to a lot more inspirational type music. So I would stay around the gospel type music. I would stick around the some hip hop music, which kind of sounds in contrast to listening to gospel music, then you listen to hip hop music. But that's what I would do. So I would make sure that the music I was listening to had some type of inspiration for me.
Oh. Okay, we are online now. And what tips would you give for online charismatic performances?
Yeah. Well, online performances, you have to realize, are different from in-person performances. One thing that you have to realize is that your timing is going to be different. Usually when you're speaking to an audience, let's say you have a humorous line, you deliver that line and you're expecting an immediate reaction to what you just said, to your piece of humor. In an online setting, you don't have the benefit of a live audience reaction. The reaction isn't going to be immediate, and the reaction may not even be verbal, because you're not going to be able to hear your audience laughing, because again, most of the time they're going to be on mute. So you have to make sure that your speech accounts for that. You're no longer going to wait for 3 seconds after you deliver your line waiting for a laugh. You have to go almost immediately after you deliver the line. You can't wait for your audience. You can't wait for a reaction that's not going to come. Therefore, your speech delivery is going to be a bit faster than it usually would be if you were speaking in person. Something else that people have to realize is that, and I think a lot of people have realized this now, but for those who don't, you have to look into that camera lens. The camera lens is the equivalent of eye contact in a in-person speech. So I could look at you right now because I want to see your face and see your image, but that's not going to work very well, because now it's looking as if I'm not giving you proper eye contact. So I have to keep myself from looking at the screen and the images, which is counterintuitive to how we are taught as speakers. We are always told to look people in the eye, look people in the face, but we can't do that because the perception of eye contact isn't going to be there. So you have to train yourself to look at the camera lens. Then lastly, I kind of alluded to it before, but you really have to change the way that you engage with your audience. You're no longer going to be able to engage in the traditional ways before. So you have to probably engage people more with typing out in chat, and you have to engage them more with physical movement, not so much verbal responses.
Okay. And what makes someone a credible and charismatic public speaker?
Honestly, what makes you credible isn't necessarily your skill as a public speaker. What makes you credible is the experience that you have. That's where you really build your credibility. There are people who are average public speakers, but they have a tremendous following because of their experience. People view them and say, these people are absolutely credible, not because of their speaking prowess, but because of their experience that they have lived through, their experiences that they continue to share. Now, if you are a quality public speaker, that just adds to your credibility. Nothing is better than having a person who has tremendous amounts of experience being able to articulate their experience in a clear and concise way. So, but the main thing is that you get the credibility off the stage. I think what makes me credible as a public speaker isn't because I'm the world champion of public speaking, but it was the experiences that I went through to become the world champion of public speaking. And being that it is public speaking, I'm able to articulate what I learned and I'm able to share it with others. That's what I believe makes me more credible as a public speaker. Now, I'm not going to be, even though I'm a credible public speaker, even though I have the skills of a public speaker, I can't go on stage and talk to people about the fundamentals of engineering because I'm not an engineer. I don't know anything about engineering except for how to spell the word. So the credibility comes from the experience.
I understand. Thank you. Okay, I teach young people and I know how important the public speaking is to improve them. How can help the public speaking to the young people and everybody, in your opinion?
I think with children, it's really crucial to get them involved in public speaking early, even if they won't want to, because having that experience will be helpful for them in the future. I was forced into public speaking on several occasions by my mother, who just wanted me to get on stage and get in front of people and speak to people even though I didn't want to. But looking back on it, I realized that was quality experience that helped me later on. At the very least, it gave me a good story that I continue to use to this day. I think with children nowadays, it's important to get them involved in public speaking early and consistently. So it's having multiple projects around public speaking. It's helping them talk to their peers in a formal setting so that they're not afraid to speak in front of their peers later on. If they're exposed to it early, then they won't be as nervous or as afraid of it when they get older. I think when they get older and they haven't had that experience, it's a lot more challenging and the amount of fear that you have will be a lot more present.
Okay. I have two more questions.
Okay.
Okay. What does courage mean to you? Because I deal with courage today and I'm very curious.
I think for me, courage is really the process of doing something that your physical body is telling you not to do. Humans are hardwired to be self-preserving. So when you are about to speak in front of a large crowd, for instance, your body is telling you, no, there is danger in that situation. You shouldn't do that. You should run away. Courage is having the ability to fight that and do it anyway. Now, I'm not telling you to face down a lion because that is proper fear. That's not courage, that is stupidity. But having courage is when your body is telling you that you shouldn't do something, but you stand up and say, no, I'm going to stand up and do it anyway because I know that my life isn't in danger. I'm not going to die because of this. I can do it. So there is no true harm that's going to come to me. Now, there are other people who will put themselves in physical harm. Like those people have courage that I can't even imagine. But for me, as a public speaker, that's what it means for me.
Okay. My last question is, what are your aims for the future or for this year?
For me, really, my aim this year is to get more involved in the virtual side of speaking and kind of change the way we see public speaking. I plan on doing a lot more with YouTube in 2021. I'm working on a lot of content that I will be releasing very soon within this month. My YouTube channel is Aaron W. Beverly. You can find me there. You can see my content. There's going to be stuff about contests, but there will also be things about general public speaking. I'll also be putting out content that I have delivered in person before, such as keynotes and Q&A sessions. My goal is to build a public speaking education library online, because I do believe that public speaking is a ability that everybody should have. But the problem is that it can be fairly expensive to get a quality public speaking education. I want to make it as cheap as possible, and the cheapest that you can possibly make it is free. So that is my goal. That is what I will be working on in 2021.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.